Hey there everybody, a new bike came in to review the Soma Double Cross, and on it came a pretty interesting component that I thought I would do a quick kind of first look highlight on. And it is the S-Ride R500 brifters. You guys know I am a fan of all cable bike systems, cable brake, cable shifting, and they are becoming far and few between, especially from the larger component manufacturers. Typically, most brifters we see these days are cable actuated for the shifting, but they are hydraulic for the braking, and some of us just want cables on both. The shifter that a lot of people have been trained to, of course, has been the Microshift Sword. Excellent system, but I do think the S-Ride is going to give it a little run for its money. If you're not familiar with S-Ride, our friends over at Mary Sales and Soma Fab distribute and carry them, and you can buy these shifters now. As the story goes, S-Ride was formed by former SRAM engineers that were left in the dust when SRAM moved factories, or that's at least what I've heard. They've taken their expertise and have created their own component group. All that to say that this is not their first rodeo, and it definitely shows. The S-Ride R500s are a 10-speed brifter, cable brake, cable shifting, and it uses the same cable pull as new Shimano Road. Looking at its compatibility chart, it lists the 4700, 4720 derailleurs as being compatible. So that's 10-speed Tiagra. And if you guys are a fan of the channel, then you know if it's compatible with 10-speed Tiagra, that means it's also compatible with things like 11-speed 105. But more interestingly, at least in my opinion, is it's compatible with GRX 11-speed. So what's cool about this brifter is that if you pair it up with the GRX 810 2x11 nominally rear derailleur, it'll work just fine, and you can pull off a nice wide range double. On this bike, it's got 11 to 42 on the rear, and it's running a 40 to 28 tooth chain rings in the front. So essentially, you're like riding a 1x, but with a really good bailout gear. If you need more low gears, you can change that 28 to like a 26 or even a 24. And that's my favorite combination for an adventure double when you're going off-road, doing crazy climbs, and carrying a bunch of stuff. But anyways, back to the shifters. How do they feel? Are they any good? One thing I like about them is because they are mechanical, there's no need for a master cylinder, so everything remains pretty compact. If you have smaller hands, I feel like it would work pretty well for you. The rubber hoods are nice and grippy. They don't feel cheap at all. They feel at least par with like a Shimano Tiagra level. The shifting works really similar to Shimano, so the big paddle slash brake lets you shift into the easier gears on the rear cassette, and the smaller paddle clicks down into the harder gears in the rear. You can shift to an easier gear 3 at a time if you want, but going into the harder gears, it is a single shift per gear. The paddles have this really nice sateen and now kind of ubiquitous gray finish. It feels like GRX. It feels like Microshift Sword in the hand. All that to say, it feels really good. One thing I like about the brake lever is its kind of notched profile. There's a real defined notch and kind of like secure place to stick your 2 fingers when you're riding in the hoods. I feel like shifting and braking is really easy and similar to Shimano, both from the hoods and in the drops. That's probably my biggest sticking point with Microshift. They felt a little clunky to shift in the drops, and plus the paddle to go into the smaller gear I felt was like a little too small. On the R500, that's not the case. It's a lot of real estate. It's hard to miss either paddle. I've taken this on a couple of rides, and I can 100% confirm that it will work with your Shimano rear derailleurs as long as they're like the new Shimano road pull. So Tiagra 4700, Shimano 105, Ultegra Dura-Ace 11-speed, and GRX 11-speed. I can't confirm 12. For me, like 11's the magic line that I'm not going to cross. It may work with that, but in terms of 10, 11-speed Shimano road rear derailleurs, it will work fine. I feel braking is really good from the hoods. They're paired up with some Yokozuna cable actuated hydraulic disc brakes, and I can bring the bike to a skidding stop, no problem from the hoods. In terms of shift quality, it feels like around that Tiagra 4700 level. It's not as like crisp and clicky as the 105 11-speed that I've recently put on one of my bikes, but it's no slouch. I actually like the shifting on this better than Microshift Sword. Which is kind of like a big thing to say since I've been, a Microshift Sword advocate slash evangelist for the last couple years. But these are really good. If I have any criticisms, the pedal to shift into harder gears, the touch feels a little light and flimsy when compared to something like a 105 level or even Tiagra 4700. Not that it's going to fall apart, but it just doesn't have that kind of resistance that your brain sometimes associates with like a quality build. It's like the spring tension isn't as strong. I also found that the throw to get it into gear feels like a little bit longer than Shimano. Not as long as Microshift. Like, I think like Microshift has like a really long throw. This is not that. It does lack that like slight bit of like crispness and just short travel. But that's being really nitpicky. Honestly, being on the bike, going back and forth between my Shimano bikes and this one, they're pretty similar. Like the only giveaway for me is when I shift into a harder gear, that pedal just feels like slightly looser than the Tiagra 4700. But in terms of the braking and how that lever feels, like I couldn't tell them apart. Let's talk about price for the pair for both the left and right. This is with the front derailleur. I think the one by actually costs the same. Right now on the Soma site, it's listed for $129 USD. Which I think is pretty good when you compare it with Tiagra. I'm using Universal Cycles as my benchmark here. They've got Tiagra 4700 shifters, and those are like $230, a considerable amount less than Tiagra 4700. When you compare it to Microshift Sword 2x, again using Universal Cycles as the benchmark here, not affiliated, just use them as my benchmark pricing. Those cost $170, $169.99. So for $40 less, you get a shifter that is closer to Tiagra in functionality, in how the pedals work, the travel, all that stuff, for a lot less money than Tiagra, and for a decent amount less than even Microshift Sword. And also the thing with Sword is, since it uses a cable pull that's closer to Dynasys mountain bike rear derailleur, the Sword shifters wouldn't work with a Shimano GRX rear derailleur, which is my favorite and go-to derailleur to use. Another interesting thing, I know some people aren't a fan of the cable routing on Shimano brifters. Like, if you've ever had to mess with them, they go into one side, make a really sharp bend, and some people, every time I post about Shimano brifters, like there's a lot of whinging about, broken cable heads, all this stuff. I had to put in a new cable to use a GRX rear derailleur just because it needed more cable. So it was a good opportunity to check out the cable routing, and it was surprisingly easy. I didn't have to peel back the hood or anything. The shift cable actually just goes straight down into the shifter, does a little wiggle, and works through the ratchet. So it avoids that like severe 90-degree angle bend. So for those of you that are maybe slightly over concerned about broken cable shifter heads, then calm your fears. If there's any kind of downside to that design, when you do brake, it kind of exposes that top part to the elements. So if you ride in lots of rain, not saying that this would happen, but there's a greater chance that it might get a little moist in there. So for $129, you get closer to a Tiagra 4700 alternative. You can use GRX rear derailleurs. It feels really good in the hand. Maybe the throw is a little bit longer than the Shimano brifters, but it's still pretty dang good. I know some of you are gonna ask, what about 11 speed? They might be working on a 2x11. I don't know if it's gonna be all cable, but for now, if 10 speed is enough, if you've been eyeing Tiagra 4700, but its price at $232 is a little steep in 2025, then I think this is an awesome alternative. You can get it right now, $129. That's all in. That's not importing and then having to pay tariffs and whatever duties. That's straight from area sales in San Francisco to your home. But that's why I think, let me know what you think of these shifters, or are you still diehard Microshift Sword? I know they're a great alternative, big fan of them. But for me, it is compelling that I can use the GRX 810 rear derailleur, which is like, I have them on 3 bikes now. If you like this nerdy content, looking at alternative components, then please consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon, picking up some stickers and merch. If you're in Europe and you're watching this, we've been working with the folks at La Chouette in Paris, so you can get some stickers and stuff directly within the EU. Check out all the links below, and as always, keep the supple side down.